A Timeline of the Development of Concrete by Jamie Klein, John Flynn, and Ridge Baker. Archaeologists have discovered evidence from 5600 BC of the early use of concrete in Europe. Along the banks of the Danube River in Yugoslavia, the concrete was used to make the floors of huts. In 3000 BC, China used concrete to hold materials together for bamboo for their boats and as mortar in the Great Wall of China. In 600 BC, the Greeks discovered a natural pozzolan that could be added to concrete to give it hydraulic properties. This allowed it to harden underwater. One of the earliest uses for this new type of concrete was to build water storage tanks. By 80 AD, the Romans were building many projects from concrete. Two of these included the aqueducts and the Colosseum. The aqueducts were built by Roman army engineers to bring fresh water to Rome and other major cities. The Colosseum was an outdoor amphitheater built to host gladiator fights and other special events. It was built from concrete and stone together, and one of the big secrets of the Colosseum was that the outdoor passageways used vaulted ceilings, which added a lot of strength to the building without adding additional weight. In 128 AD, the Romans built the Pantheon. It was one of their greatest engineering marvels, and the span of its dome was not surpassed for hundreds of years. After 400 AD and the fall of the Roman Empire, many of the innovations the Romans had made in concrete were lost. Around 700 AD, the Saxons built the first concrete mixer. It was in the form of a shallow bowl cast into bedrock. A beam with paddles attached to it rotated about a central post and was powered by humans or animals. In 1756, John Smeaton rediscovered hydraulic cement through repeated testing in fresh and salt water. He discovered that cement would harden underwater if it was produced from limestone that had large amounts of clay. In 1824, a bricklayer and mason from Leeds, England, named Joseph Aspin filed a patent for what he called Portland cement. The name came from its resemblance to stone from the Isle of Portland. In 1825, the building of the Erie Canal created the first large demand for cement in the United States. The cement that was used was made from hydraulic lime. In 1848, reinforcement was used in concrete for the first time by John Louis Lambert. He constructed several small rowboats out of concrete, using iron bars and wire mesh as reinforcement. In the 1850s, the first concrete roads were built in Austria. The idea spread to England by the 1865 and then to the rest of the world. In 1854, the first reinforced concrete building was created by William Wilkinson. He built a small two-story concrete servant's cottage that had the floor and roof reinforced with iron bars and wire rope.
In 1871, David O. Saylor established the first Portland cement plant in the United States in Copley, Pennsylvania. Although popular in Europe, concrete was not produced in the United States until 1871. Saylor experimented with selecting and mixing different kinds of rock from his quarries to produce Portland cement. In 1902, Thomas Edison was a pioneer in furthering development of the rotary kiln. Edison's additions to concrete technology are not well known to the public, even though he had a great impact on how concrete was developed. In 1904, the Ingalls Building was the first concrete skyscraper. It was constructed in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1904 and made use of the Ransom system of reinforcement. It was actually not only the first concrete skyscraper in America, it was the first concrete skyscraper in the whole world. In 1908, Thomas Edison patents a system of cast iron molds for a monolithic concrete house that forms walls, floors, stairways, roof, bath and laundry tubs, and conduits for electric and water service in one single casting operation. In 1910, a Norwegian civil engineer named Foner thought of using concrete to build ships. It wasn't until 1917, when wartime steel shortages required the use of cement for construction, that Foner's idea was used. In 1918, a concrete ship, the Atlantis, was commissioned. N.K. Foner of Norway launched the first ocean-going concrete ship, an 84-foot long boat named the Namsfjord. In 1911, with the invention of shotcrete came the ability to place concrete in vertical or horizontal surfaces without formwork. This process has paved the way for easier placement procedures and for an alternative repair method. In 1913, the first patent for a concrete pump was filed. This made concrete transportation easy and allowed on-site mixing. The pump basically replaces the wheelbarrow in pumping. It brings the concrete to the place where it has to go. The speed at which concrete is pumped is a lot faster also. A wheelbarrow load of concrete is pumped in seconds with a pump. So really, it is much more effective than a wheelbarrow ever was.
1917, the first standards for Portland cement came about. These standards were set out and published in 1916 by the U.S. Bureau of Standards and American Society for Testing Materials, but did not come into effect until January 1st of 1917. In 1930, air and training agents were introduced. These were used to improve the concrete's resistance to the freezing and thawing by adding small amounts of air into the mixture. Other advantages: the air bubbles increased the cohesion of the fresh mix, which means less bleeding and segregation. It also helped with workability and which was increased because of the ball-bearing effect of the bubbles. In 1936 was the first major dams that were built. It was the Hoover Dam was one of them. It was a horizontal arch design which ensured the great compression strength of the concrete is employed. And then the Grand Coulee Dam, which is said to have enough concrete to build a 4-foot, 4-inch deep sidewalk that's twice around the equator. In 1936, Frank Lloyd Wright built the Falling Water, which is recognized as one of his finest works. Wright was also the first one to exploit the cantilever. Cantilever is supported by the reinforced concrete. 1962 was the beginning of the use of reinforced concrete in modern skyscrapers. This was used in the Twin Towers at Marina City in Chicago, and they both stood 558 feet tall. Whenever they were finished, the two towers were both the tallest residential buildings and the tallest reinforced concrete structures in the world. In 1967, the first concrete sports dome was created. The assembly hall was constructed at University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. A 400-foot pre-stressed saucer, the roof was cast into 24 segments of 15 degrees each. In the 1970s, fiber reinforcement was introduced. Concrete reinforced with fibers is less expensive than hand-tied rebar, while still increasing the tensile strength many times. In 1995, insulated concrete forms began being used in homes. These are styrofoam blocks that are built up and poured full of concrete to create a house that is relatively maintenance-free.